for everything. Okay, we're live.
All right. So yeah, we'll go through the minutes from the last meeting. I think that the first thing was the recordings. It looks like you got this set up. Now I'm not clear on how to make that happen, Michael. And you had an action to send around some link to some simpler instructions. I don't know if that's something you can just Google.
Yeah, I don't know that there's just instructions. What I thought is I could show you what I do.
Okay. Yeah, we don't have to do that now.
Yeah.
But maybe after or something.
Yeah.
So I set up instructions and I just like.
Yep.
I had like zero energy to try them out. There are too many steps, more than one.
Yeah, well, I think those may have been. I doubt they're doing it the way that the work groups typically do it anyway. So.
Okay. Time zone shift. So we moved it to 1. Everybody's cool with that. The calendar's updated now.
Yep.
Perfect.
Is that a permanent thing, or just for this meeting?
So that's a permanent thing. I think the discussion, it was originally going to be at 1, and then as I scheduled them out over the shift to or from daylight savings time, it moved back an hour, and so I wasn't exactly sure whether people adjusted things with time zone, if it was sort of a West Coast centric view of time or not. So we just kept it. Came up there some conflicts, so there was no opposition to moving it. So going forward, it should be at 1 p.m. And we're going to do it every 2 weeks, with some exceptions. I think that the next week or the next one is skipped because it's a holiday week. And so the next meeting will be on the 10th of January, if I recall correctly. So there's that. So the async context formalization stuff. We've got a draft. I just put it up on a public GitHub thing. I'll share the link. It is still rough, but people are welcome to look at it, provide feedback. I think the other thing with this, we can actually talk about it. I think it'll come up in the agenda later. Let me post the link.
Is that an issue? Like, is there an issue that's covering
There's
that?
an issue that we opened after the Vancouver, it Code Interactive thing that's just sort of tracking it, saying like, hey, there was this paper that Mark wrote, and we want to try and take that to kind of the next level, get it a little more democratized, and then figure out how to move it forward. And we were sort of tracking it there.
Right. What's the number for that? I'm just looking like you probably should just put the link that you're talking about into. Okay, it's 107. So that is on the right. I see it's later in the agenda. Got it. Thanks.
So we can discuss that a little more. What else? Trace events, or no actions on that. The C++ async hooks and better API, right? So there was an action on me to actually make sure that there was something tracking that in the async hooks tracking issue number 124. There was, so I didn't have to do anything there. Issue 124, the action there was to open an issue and ping people that were using async hooks, and to see if they had any feedback. So I did open that issue. There were a few people that started chiming in, which is good. And I think I tagged that for the agenda. So I think it's on the agenda. We can talk about that in a little more detail. The summit, I think that's on the agenda. There's an action on you, Michael, to get a detailed schedule posted. And I think there were also some questions about that. I missed the rest of the topics. It sounded like there was some discussion around 168. It sounds like there's an open issue on it. There's some tracking, or there's some progress being made there.
I think they're both still on. We didn't take them off the agenda, so maybe we can just cover them when we get to the.
Okay. Anything else from last meeting's minutes that anybody wants to talk about or discuss? Or all right. So agenda for this time. So Integrate C++ async hooks and better API with the native abstraction. I don't know that there's any update here. Is Andreas on the call or?
No, I don't think he's on here.
Okay.
Right. I guess we had quite a discussion last time about how to maybe get the people from NAN involved, but I don't remember. I thought we had, I can't remember what the outcome was.
I think we ended up kind of tabling it because we needed somebody to volunteer to basically talk to them and follow through on that. And we didn't really come to any conclusion as far as I remember
Right.
about who that should be.
There's some discussion around maybe waiting till they're out of experimental too, but.
Yeah, but I don't know that I think the argument around it was that correctness of this API implies that stuff is
Right.
done and that native modules are using that correctly, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know how this moves forward without sort of a champion to drive it.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. It needs. So I guess it's maybe left on the agenda until we have Andreas on the call.
Yeah, I mean, he can provide the most context. I think I don't know that the discussion is going to be any different, which is that he doesn't have enough of a. I think if I remember correctly, he was saying he didn't have enough of the background knowledge in the what's it called, the NAN API, if I remember, the native abstraction thing, and that those people weren't necessarily. I don't know if responsive is the right word, motivated, or had the time to kind of figure out what the right thing to do here is. So,
right. I guess it's like, from my perspective, we need somebody who's interested in pushing on the async hook side to do something like submit a PR, even if it's not complete or something, right? If we've asked them, if we've asked the NAN guys, they can get involved, and we're not getting a response. The only way I could see is like we actually, get somebody to do a PR, and I think most likely, unless we have another volunteer in this group, is somebody from the async hooks team has got to say, okay, I'm going to go do that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I just don't know who that person is.
Yeah, so maybe that's wait till next time Andreas is here and see if he's got any other suggestions or people he's seen who are active on the async hook side who might, be willing to get involved on that front.
Okay, let's do that. Okay, so moving on. So number 129, this is the issue I opened. Some good feedback, some questions about domains. I think there's another issue that somebody opened around domains and what's the future of that. I don't know that there's a clear answer there. Natalie Wolf from New Relic had some comments about some performance stuff, which is actually quite interesting. And maybe a little concerning, just in terms of the degradation when async hooks is turned on and it's no-opping, right? And this is
that's really a key thing.
Yeah. So I don't know what the discussion has been about that kind of stuff around async hooks in the past. I know that there was effort to make it fast, but I'm assuming that the hops from native code into JavaScript are just costly, and that's where that slowdown is coming from, right?
In terms of getting more feedback, has anybody else sort of retweeted or publicized that?
I have not.
I tweeted it, but I can see there's only like 3,000 impressions so far, which is not a huge number. So I think if we can get everybody else to sort of tweet it out as well, maybe we can get a larger audience.
I'll definitely do that. That's a good idea. at Elastic, we haven't merged in the PR yet for adding async hooks to our APM solution. But when we do it, we decided to actually do it behind a feature flag for now, so people can switch it on and off if they want to. And part of adding this to our APM solution is also to do benchmarks. So I'll add results of those benchmarks to the issue as well when we get them.
Okay. And I guess I could ask. I'd have to see. I don't know if they have already, but I could ask the Node.js Twitter account to retweet that one of our tweets if that makes sense too.
Could you maybe just post a link to your tweet in the chat here, because I'll be happy to retweet it as well.
Okay, sure. Let me find it. Just give me one sec. Right here it is.
Awesome.
Yeah, if we think that one looks fine, I can just ask Zibby to retweet as well, which will get us a broader audience.
Yeah, I would. I'd help, but I don't have a Twitter account.
Okay.
Because it doesn't work with my Rotary. But
sure. Okay. Well, yeah, I'll just get them to retweet that one and.
Okay.
We'll leave it on the agenda to come back. I'm just in terms of taking notes. Leave on the agenda to come back once there's more feedback. Right.
Yeah, that sounds good. So stable API, async hook stable API number 124. I don't know that we've got any update there. Again, Andreas, I think, is the most informed. So I don't know that we anything to talk about. The summit, it looks like we've locked on some dates. So that's February 12th and 13th, right?
Yes.
Like there's a proposed agenda down in the comments. I was thinking maybe we'd hoist that up into the issue. I don't know if we want to go through and actually like block some times out for some of these things, or I don't exactly know the structure of this, how these things work. I think there were some questions again about like how late do we expect this to go. I don't know if there's 2 days. I don't know if this is too much stuff to talk about over 2 days or not enough stuff for 2 days.
Like in the first VM summit, what we ended up doing is we basically had like the first morning was common, where we sort of introduced the key issues, had a bit of discussion on them, tried to put a little bit of framing around them as a group in terms of like, what the issue was, how important we thought it was. Then we actually broke out for the next 2 half days into separate groups. Where we had a big enough group so that we got like 4 or 5 people together into those subgroups, and they sort of worked on, okay, what concrete things can we either do like right now to work on them, or put together a plan in terms of steps that need to take place, try and put a little bit more substance. And then we spent the last half day together as a larger group again to go through with, basically each group presented what they discussed, what they talked about, and we discussed as a larger group to see, was there consensus? Okay, we can move forward. The challenge with that sometimes is of course, like I'm interested in all these different ones, so it's kind of hard to choose but that's, we can think of whether, that's the kind of approach that we want to do, or we can try and drive through all of them together as a larger group. There's no real fixed requirement of how we do this. It's really how we think we can best get through the content and make it the most productive. I was thinking, it was kind of like a 9 to 5 each day. Too much longer than that, you kind of get burnt out. Of course, like the first night we can go out for dinner together and continue to do that. The last day, sometimes it ends up petering out a little bit earlier, although I think we have lots of content here, so I could easily see, going the whole time.
Yeah, I think that the proposal kind of have some summary content presented and then breakout sessions and then report out for the last half day sounds like a fine structure to me. I don't know if other people have opinions on that. I take it as no.
Yeah. So I'm happy to kind of take what I've got there, read through, like James had asked to have some sort of demo as part of it, sort of take what's there, try and put it into that structure of like, okay, morning, we're going to, this isn't the fixed list, but this is our starting list of, morning we'll do this. We'll break it out into the afternoon and the next morning into these. And of course we can adjust. The purpose of that first half morning is we can totally change that if we want to. But here's the candidate, and then the last one getting back together. I'm happy to sort of put through a first cut of that and then pull it into the top section. I might do that early January because I'm off on holiday starting Friday. But
yeah, no, that sounds great.
Yeah. The other sort of action I have in there is I got to figure out whether I need information from people in terms of who's showing up. I suspect I'm going to need like a name, company, maybe something like that, but I'll post that in there as well in terms of the things. I've booked the room. I still don't have food, so I'm trying to get approval to bring in lunches. In the worst case, there's a cafeteria right on site, so we can just go and eat on our own. I booked a room. It turns out to be the executive briefing center, so it looks, and I went and looked at it. It'll easily accommodate like 20 or so people, so I think that looks good.
Are we at risk of overflowing?
I think the room is, I'd have to look at the count. The room I went and looked at is big enough that, if we have 5 people more, it's going to be fine.
Great.
Even 10, I think, would fit into that room.
Great.
I think it's sort of, I said it's sort of up for 20, but when you look at the room itself, it's like, yeah, okay, we could find some chairs and not have a problem. There's actually several rooms in there. It's not clear whether, the other one will be used or not at the time. So if that's not used, we might even be able to use that for breakout.
Perfect.
It might be of a challenge if we don't have the other room and we all, breaking out into 4 different groups in the same room is a little bit harder said than done, but we did that in past ones. So I think we just have to work through that. But yeah, my next action, when I get time, and like I said, probably early in January, I'll go through, count the people, put what I need. I just need to ask security what that is and put the agenda together. But I think it's shaping up pretty well in terms of quite a few people saying they're going to be there. And, I think people have shown interest in the topics that are listed there.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, great. So you've got the action to follow up on the agenda with that and follow up on the registration process and so.
Yeah.
Do we think that people are staying at least for the to the day after? Are we going out like I think it's Monday and Tuesday, right? So are we going out Tuesday evening for dinner, or are people flying home Tuesday?
I personally haven't booked anything. I was thinking I was going to try and fly out on Tuesday night, but I don't exactly know. I haven't looked at flights, so I think a lot of that will depend on what time I'd land and things like that. So
I'm just wondering if I should book an extra day at the hotel or not.
The last VM Summit, I think a few people, like half the people, went out for dinner afterwards. The other half were already leaving. Just as so it's, and I'll be there. So, but I don't want to. I think you need the input from everybody else, right?
I just wanted to feel the room. So.
Okay. Okay, so number 107, so async context. So we're done with the summit stuff, we can move on?
Yeah.
Okay, so async context formalization and diagnostic support. So Mark's been working on this markdown document. It's in a public repo now. I posted the link. It's still rough. but feel free to take a look at it and chime in with stuff. If people want to start authoring some things, I think that'd be great. What I was thinking that the general structure of the document is sort of there's an event stream that's well defined that says what the sort of key events in asynchronous context lifecycle, and then there's sort of a section on how do we define a DAG based on that, right? Based on those events, right? And then I think there's some sort of set of use cases that we'd like to then be able to say, here's a problem like long stack traces, and given the previous definitions, here's how you would solve that. Or here's continuation local storage, and given the previous definitions, here's how you would solve that. So hopefully we can kind of take the model, show how the model actually solves real problems, and it'll be really clear as to the motivation. I know that Ali, you had suggested previously that we take one or two of these examples and try and use them throughout. I think the intention was there to do that, but we were just kind of stumbling over that, and it wasn't really sticking, right? And so we just did some restructuring and moved it around. And then after the sort of the use cases section, there would be a set of code examples. What I was thinking for the code examples is that we can write some code that takes this event stream that gets produced, and then we can use that to visualize the graph and the transitions in the graph, right? Because if you have a DAG and these events are happening and they're creating edges and nodes are changing state and things like that, we should be able to visualize that in some kind of a slideshow. And then we can find some way to kind of link to that. So you can say, hey, here's promise.all, and this is what the graph that you would see if you execute a simple block of code that's using promise.all. Or here's a set interval. This is what a set interval would look like, right? So that was kind of the thinking there. It's rough. Give us feedback. Yeah, I think finding the time to work on this is, certainly for me, it's been a challenge. So, Mark, I don't know if Mark's still on the call, if you had anything you wanted to add.
No, Mark just left.
Oh, okay. Is that Dan?
By the way, I'm Dan. I worked on the paper with Mark on the async formal context, and I'm now just starting to join in on this new document that hopefully makes it more concrete. It's still, right, like Mike said, it's still very rough, but I think that's a great opportunity for everyone to fix things.
Is it okay to paste that link into the issue?
I will paste it into the issue.
Okay.
The link to the paper or the document?
The link to the doc, like the draft document that Mike sent us. He pasted the link here in the chat, but I think it would be good to have it in the actual issue itself.
It's still pretty rough, so
I'll put it in for transparency.
Yeah, if I'm putting it in the minutes here too, right? Like, anyway, I don't know if there's any downside to people looking at it and giving you feedback, right?
No, I mean, it's still at a point that it's rough enough that there's probably at risk of generating more confusion than clarity is, I think,
right.
The concern. But I hope that people can get the gist of it, and
I would just frame it
where it's going. I'll do that. I'll
just frame the context that it's rough and whatever, and so anybody who clicks on the link knows what to expect.
Yeah, but I know that we talked about this in the past, and other people have expressed interest in seeing that, and it's bad on us. We've taken so long to get to this point. But it's there. So, but that's the update with that. Are there any questions?
Well, thanks for putting this together.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I hope that it can solve a lot of problems I think that we all have. The other comment is, like, we put it in a separate repository just because we didn't want to deal with permissions around, having to make updates to it while it was undergoing what should end up being a significant number of revisions. So, and if people are interested in doing PRs against that, please feel free. At a minimum, it'll help sort of clarify some of what it is we're talking about. So, okay, so this issue number 95, the Node.js Collaboration Summit Diagnostics discussion minutes. I think really the only action left on here is there's this notion of, like, how do you get everybody out of the business of monkey patching everything? There's an interest in this, I think, from Microsoft's side, because we've got some stuff that's monkey patching the hell out of things. And so we have this, diagnostic channel library that hopefully is someplace that you can have subscribers to some of these different events so that everybody doesn't have to go in and monkey patch stuff. But we don't have somebody on our end right now that that has the capacity to actually drive that forward. It is on GitHub. I think it's linked on this. If somebody's interested in this, either on the call or through this this working group, you can reach out to me and I can kind of kickstart you if that's something that's interesting. So,
would it make sense to close? Like, is there a different issue to talk about that specific problem?
I don't know that there is. It was just tracked as a comment in here. I thought about closing this before, and I thought there was a couple of other things going on in here that I just didn't take the initiative to close it. And I can't remember exactly what those were now.
Because I'd probably be suggesting we close it and open up specific issues for each thing that should sort of go on. So when you look at the title, you know what it is. And
I'll do that.
So, like, I could see an issue on, alternatives to monkey patching. Maybe we don't put it on the agenda until we find somebody who can actually push it forward, but it's kind of there a reminder that says, yeah, this is something as a group we're interested in. We just don't have bandwidth. And maybe, we should make sure that that's on the list for the agenda at the Diagnostics Summit. We can kind of discuss, where all these things fit into the priorities, right?
Yeah. I will take an action to do that unless somebody else wants to.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I misunderstand the issue with the monkey patching thing, but isn't that basically what async hooks is trying to fix for us?
I think there's two things, right? One is that you need to know where these asynchronous transitions are happening, right? And that's one case where people are going in and monkey patching, right? And that, I think, is what async hooks should address, or it's the intention of it to address. And then the other issue is, say, for example, you want some details about something that happened, right? So, for example, somebody's making a read call on a database API, and you're an APM vendor, and you want to know that, right? Then you go in and you monkey patch, the Mongo read thing or something, and you capture whatever information you need, and you move on, right? And I think there's a number of examples of that. People are monkey patching Express APIs and monkey patching Mongo and Postgres and Redis and whatever, and not because of the context transitions, but because they would need additional information. And so the intent with the diagnostic channel, I think, is to get that additional information so that they don't have to go through and monkey patch everything. So maybe it's not a significant problem. I don't know exactly all the details of what other APM vendors are doing in this space, but I know that it came up in our situation. So
Certainly in the discussion in Germany, we talked about like coming up with some guidance or simple, some APIs that modules could use in a common way to help with that.
Yeah, and I think that was the intent with this diagnostic channel thing. I think it's a question of, well, I don't know. It would be ideal, I think, if everybody who's writing some of these libraries that have some such information to produce could just kind of instrument their own things, push it out on some published data on some channel, and then whoever's interested can just subscribe to that channel and read that data, and then have some interesting outcome from that. Maybe it's the fact that you can monkey patch things so easily. Maybe it's overkill, or it's not necessary. I don't know.
I think it's worth having the issue to if we haven't had time to discuss or think about it enough yet, to have that discussion or thinking get to the point where it's like, yeah, it just doesn't make sense, and people are happy with monkey patching, or no, there's something to be done there, even if we can't do it right away.
I'll open that, and then I'll take this one off the agenda and close it.
There was also a thing that I think I raised on Twitter recently, which is, so we have now I think it's called the providers API in async hooks, which is, so if you have a userland callback queue, you're supposed to use that API to fire async hooks calls, though obviously people aren't doing that yet. So it would be part of our job to also go out and reach out to these people and these module owners and make them utilize that API, maybe make PRs and stuff like that. But until all that gets done, it would be nice to have a list of known modules that break the continuity. So, for example, like the one we all know is generic pool, for example, right? So maybe that's also an issue we should open to kind of, if people agree that that's a good idea, to kind of keep tabs on these are the modules that are currently, that we know are like sinners, so to speak, and are breaking all the APM vendors and continuous local storage, etc.
Yeah, how do we want to identify that?
Basically,
in that issue that we opened about the async hook stuff, I think there was a question about what's getting, are there modules that are known to lose context in some way? I can't remember what people said about it. But how do you suggest that we actually identify the set of things?
Identifying is always the hard part, but I mean, we all probably at some point stumble upon a module that breaks whatever we're doing. So my suggestion was just basically step one is basically just list them, have a common list that we all can share and add to. And then from that, we can start to approach the owners of these modules or make PRs to these modules to utilize the providers API in async hooks. But having the list is like step one, and that list will never be complete, but hopefully will cover the most used modules, right? And I mean, I'll be happy to start it off and take whatever we know. And put in there, and then we probably miss some, and then others can add to it.
Yeah, that'd be great if you want to do that.
And so it'll be kind of a living document, basically. And hopefully, as time goes on, we can remove things from it again. So that was the idea. I'll should I do it as an issue? Because issues are kind of meant to be closed, but this is more like a living document. Should it be more like a markdown file somewhere that people can make pull requests to, or what is the best way to do it?
It could just be like a Google Doc. Anyone can edit. The problem with that is it's hard to be notified. So I think I would prefer a Markdown document so that way when it's modified, people can review and also be aware.
So inside the Diagnostics repo.
Yeah, I would say either an issue is fine, and I think at some point it gets to critical mass that you can turn it into a markdown, or if you just want to start from a markdown, I think that would be great as well. And I don't see in the diagnostics repository, I don't see a good place for it. There's tracing, and there's an async wrap folder. So maybe that's a good place, or maybe just under tracing.
Yeah, one thing there is in a bunch of the other repos is like a general doc directory. I guess it's like if async wrap. I wonder, like, where's the rest of our documentation for that? I'm just wondering if maybe there should be an async wrap one, right?
There is one. So tracing async wrap.
Okay, so tracing is.
Now, I don't know. This might be really out of date. I mean, it looks like it was last edited 7 months ago, so I don't know what the status is. But
sounds like the right place to put it because this is related to the Vitis API.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, this. Yep.
Yeah, I'll add it there.
Okay, perfect. Okay, what's next? What's next? So number 84, the trace event tracking issue. So Ali, you were gonna try and make some progress, get some understanding. You and Kelvin were gonna try and get some traction on this. Any updates or?
Yeah, so Kelvin has been working on updating or bringing the set of macros within Node more up to date. So that's the first step. So they're more, so all the things that are available in V8 that are not available in Node at this point, they will be synchronized. And then there's some macros people have requested to be added that don't have an implementation in V8. So that would be a thing to follow on with. And the third step would be to try to figure out a longer term path for maintaining this.
Okay, great. Anything else with that one?
That's pretty much it.
Okay. Where is...
Just on the next one, 168. Not a lot to report there, except that there has been an issue opened in the V8 repo to pursue that. It was opened a couple, well, something like 10 days ago. I don't see any sort of recent discussion or progress on that, but at least it's on the radar there. I guess we'll just, if there isn't anything happening in the next little while, we'll sort of have to maybe chime in there and say, hey, are there plans to do something or suggest some other alternative?
So the issue here, though, right, is that there's some V8 internals that are causing some of these external V8 internal changes are causing external tools to break. Is that an accurate?
Well, in this case, it was one specific thing. The move to the turbofan toolchain means that there's now an interpreter, and the tool in this case doesn't, it still works, but it's reporting you information about the interpreter, what's going on in the interpreter, as opposed to what's going on in your code.
Oh, I see.
Right, and you know, the same challenges existed in other languages like Java, where you know you need to do additional work to say, okay, we're going to translate what we know is going on in the interpreter, or use extra information on the stack to say, here's what's actually going on in your code, even though it's running in the interpreter, not running in C code.
Okay. Okay.
So I think that, you know, the fact they've opened this means they're at least considering doing that kind of work.
Okay. And then, so the next one.
Right, that one I opened as well. So there's some discussion about the metadata there. I'm not sure if I remember whether we've already discussed, you know, how much of that has been since our last meeting. But there was some back and forth discussion around how can you keep this metadata up to date. And there's sort of two pieces. One is that, you know, there's data which is tied to the structures used within V8. So as those change, you have to update that metadata. Now, that potentially can be automated, because I know we did that in one of the tools we built within IBM. The other part, though, relies on knowledge of how you sort of stitch those structures together to get interesting things. You know that this field is in this one, and so if you want to, I don't know, find out, nothing's coming to mind, but if you want to find out a piece of information, you know, I'm going to walk through from this structure to this structure to this structure to find the piece that I want. You have to know the relationships, right? And if those change, you can't automate the update of the sort of the instruction that says, I know that I use these structures to find the data, because there's sort of logic built into those, right? So that's the other piece where the individual commands in LL-Node are also dependent on, you know, how V8 stitches those things together. So there's sort of discussion on those two bits on, you know, how we might keep these more up to date more easily, but no real conclusions on that. There was some information about there's a bit more info on fixed offsets that could be useful to the people who've been, you know, the people at Joint who've been the biggest contributors to that metadata. You know, they're saying that might help maintain things a little bit more easily, but still there's just the general, I you know, having read through it, I'm still not clear whether we're broken or not broken. And we've pinged Yunong, who kind of was the one who reported it to me a few times, just still need to catch up with him to find out the pieces he thought wasn't working, just so that we can better understand that.
Okay. Yeah, I guess in the back of my mind, I'm wondering if tools that are at risk of getting broken need to be written to some stable API, same way that you'd write a native module to some stable API, and then V8 can rev underneath it. Now, I don't know how reasonable that is of an approach, right? Especially if you're talking about, you know, things that need to traverse internal structures, right?
Yeah.
But that's in the back of my mind. I'm wondering if that's a viable alternative.
Well, one thing that was discussed in the past was, this was quite a while ago, whether, you know, it actually made sense to pull some of those components into V8 itself, because the closer you get to having to, you know, if you basically have the code you need to update and the code that's changing closer together, you're going to find that out sooner, right? As opposed to, well, you've got some code which isn't really tied to V8 at all, so somebody makes a change. But, you know, that's a relatively big ask, so that didn't progress. But that was one of the other ways you know, you sort of tie the code more closely together, so that when you make a change in V8, it probably fails the tests, and so you say, oh, I got to go fix up this structure, or the definition of the structure, or, you know, even I'm going to go fix up this command, right? But that is, you know, I think that's still something to think about, but there's no easy answer, because it's not a trivial thing to ask the V8 team to take on or something like that.
Does the V8 stuff have like a debugger plugin that they use for like GDB or WinBag or something?
So LL-Node is LODB actually is the debugger that's used underneath LL-Node.
Okay.
And then you write extensions that sort of work through the debugger to get access to memory and stuff like that.
Okay. So, but there's nothing currently in V8 that says like, hey, here's a set of primitives that expose internals through some debugger thing, and you can then build abstractions on top of that, and those things will remain stable.
No.
It's all like, I looked at the code and I know the layout of some struct, so if you want to get the count of X, here's how to do it.
Yeah, we know that, you know, the object is shaped, the shape looks like this. The offset at, you know, address 8 bytes from the top is X, right?
Yeah, okay.
And that's where sort of you potentially can automate that update by having, you know, something that scans the code and says, okay, I'm going to do those structures, but then the things that use those structures are harder to update. And in fact, when you support multiple versions, you may even have to have them have, you know, alternate algorithms to say, for version 8, I'll do this, and for version 9, I'm going to do that. And
okay. So
yeah, I think that's a deeper discussion. Continue, you know, hopefully we can spend some time on that in the summit. And this specific one on like, is it now broken, just needs to continue to sort of see if we can get the original report clarified and then figure out, you know, reproduction or not on that.
So, so what then is the action on this?
The action really is, the original report was from Netflix / Unong. So if we can get, you know, Colin's chimed in saying he thinks things are okay. So we just kind of need to close the loop on, well, you know, is there something where actually it is working okay or it isn't, right? On this particular issue, because we still don't have the end user saying, yeah, okay, you're right, it does work, or no, wait a sec, these are the specific ones that didn't work. So I'd give it a little bit longer. If we can't get that eventually, we should just close it, but I think we should try a little bit longer to try and get that input.
Okay. We'll bring it up again in a month, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. That is everything on the agenda. Does anybody else have anything?
I have a quick question. I just took a look at the async wrap folder on our repo, and the stuff in there seems to be horribly outdated. And since the documentation now actually have been published to the official website, I'm thinking maybe just to remove this folder and then make a new one called async hooks instead. How do you guys feel about that?
Seems reasonable to me.
Yeah, that seems reasonable to me. You might want to ping Andreas and see if he has an opinion on that.
I'll probably make a PR with deleting it, and then he can. I'll ping him there, and then he can say if he thinks it's a good idea or not.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect. Anything else from anyone? Perfect timing.
Okay, I will stop the broadcast if that's it.
Yeah.